Welcome to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. I'm your host, Molly Watts. If you want to change your drinking habits and create a peaceful relationship with alcohol, you're in the right place. This podcast explores the strategies I use to overcome a lifetime of family alcohol abuse, more than 30 years of anxiety and worry about my own drinking, and what felt like an unbreakable daily drinking habit. Becoming an alcohol minimalist means removing excess alcohol from your life so it doesn't remove you from life. It means being able to take alcohol or leave it without feeling deprived. It means to live peacefully, being able to enjoy a glass of wine without feeling guilty and without needing to finish the bottle. With science on our side, we'll shatter your past patterns and eliminate your excuses. Changing your relationship with alcohol is possible. I'm here to help you do it. Let's start now. Well, hello and welcome back to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. With me, your host, Molly Watts, coming to you from, we're going to go with an anticipatory Oregon. Anticipatory. Yes, that's right. We are anticipating, I'm hopeful for a little dusting of snow this week. This is how it goes in Oregon. We talk about it for a week longer when it's projected out in the future and we get weather alerts and everybody's focused on these hours when we might get a little bit of snow and have, a lot of people are fearful of it. I, for one, am just praying that it happens, wanting it to happen. My son asked me, are you hoping for a snow day there, Mom? And I'm like, yes, of course I am. What that actually means is that it won't snow an ounce in Oregon, in Portland, maybe up in the hills, up in the mountains, but not down here at good old sea level or just even 1,000 feet or below. And we'll all get to just enjoy the typical 38 degrees and raining pattern, which is so prevalent in February. All right, enough about the weather. On to this week's show. We are going to be talking this week about generational differences and drinking trends and why we're drinking differently than our parents drank. And for those of you that have been around for a while, you've heard me talk about my mother's struggle with alcohol, but also potentially some of the learned behaviors that were also very reminiscent or very prevalent during the days when I was growing up in terms of how culture and society focused on alcohol. And it's different now. And many younger adults today seem to be drinking less or not at all, which is a great thing, right? And definitely compared to older generations, there is a noticeable shift compared to the baby boomers and Gen X who really normalized things like after work happy hours and weekend benders. Younger generations, especially the Millennials and Gen Z, are starting to rethink alcohol's role in their lives. And this isn't just about abstinence. It's about mindfulness. It's about self-awareness and a changing cultural narrative, which to me is very exciting. And also really a focus on what it means to live a fulfilling life. Today, we're going to explore how drinking behaviors have changed and the factors that are driving those shifts and why younger drinkers, younger generations, I should say, are embracing kind of that mindful drinking mindset from a much earlier age. Our parents' generations, or our people around our age, maybe even the Gen Xers, the boomers, we need to look at what was going on when we were growing up. Let's talk about some of the things that were happening. For the baby boomers, drinking was deeply embedded in social life. Happy hours, weekend barbecues, cocktail parties were very commonplace. In fact, working lunches, right? Drinking lunches were normal. They were normal for me when I was in the early days of my career. Going out and having alcohol at lunchtime was very normal. And drinking was often associated with success, with relaxation, with leisure. And it was normal for parents to unwind with a few glasses of wine or for couples to socialize over drinks. I 100% saw that modeled for me when I was growing up. My mom would wait for my dad to get home. I think I've talked about this before on the podcast. And she would have scotch on the rocks, like waiting for him as he walked in the door. And they would drink that together. And definitely when they socialized with people, it very much centered around alcohol. The reason that really came of age during that time was it was a time of post-war economic prosperity, and there was a lot of economic growth and optimism. And alcohol was really marketed as a symbol of the good life, right? Think Don Draper in Mad Men sipping whiskey while at work. And that was kind of the way that things were marketed to people. Social gatherings were literally built around alcohol, and not much thought was given to the long-term health effects of daily drinking. Also, obviously, back in those times, this was also prior to the U.S. Surgeon General making his declarations around smoking, and so smoking was very prevalent as well. And in light of the U.S. Surgeon General considering putting a warning on alcohol, I'm wondering how that will impact alcohol moving forward. Will we get to a point like we are with tobacco now? Now, the causative link to cancer isn't nearly as strong as it is for lung cancer with smoking. The other cancer causing, the cancer risks for alcohol are not as strong as the connection between smoking tobacco and lung cancer. But still, I am wondering because the trend is trending towards less and less alcohol consumption in the same way. And I mean, nowadays, I think you can't smoke anywhere in public, really. And so I'm wondering if where we're headed in terms of alcohol. Unlike today, there was back in those days, public awareness campaigns highlighting the risks of alcohol were almost non-existent. So like during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, not much was done with regards to talking about the risks of alcohol abuse. Terms like binge drinking, of course, alcohol use disorder, we didn't even have that yet. Everyone was an alcoholic. Those were not discussed, and moderation was rarely promoted unless someone was visibly struggling with addiction. When we move into the Gen X era, the work hard, play hard mindset really took root. Corporate culture, particularly during the 80s and 90s, made after-work drinking an absolute norm. And for me in the 90s, the late 80s and the early 90s, I can definitely say that was the case. Happy hours, networking events, office parties fueled this environment where alcohol was really kind of seen as a necessary component of success. And when I look back on those days, honestly, I never even considered not drinking at events like that. I never considered going to office parties, to networking events, to happy hours, and not consuming alcohol. It was very much just a part of what I did, who I was, and gave zero thought to how it was impacting my health or if I was drinking past certain limits. I don't know. It just never even crossed my mind. Of course, at that point, I still hadn't really developed a daily habit yet, but I was getting there. I was definitely getting there. Now let's look at what's driving this shift among millennials. And those people, as a reminder, are born between 1981 and 1996, and Gen Z, who is anyone born after 1997. Both groups have taken a more cautious approach to alcohol, and many are embracing either reduced drinking or choosing to abstain altogether. And one of the biggest reasons younger generations are drinking less is because there is a growing focus on health and wellness. And I think all of us, right? You're listening to this podcast. Part of that is because you are probably someone who is concerned with your overall health and wellness. And I think about that thinking, I don't know how much in the 70s and 80s, how much we were doing. It seems to me like until my dad had his first
heart attack, which happened in 1980. He had been at that point, he had already knew he had angina, and so he had been participating in like a heart or a fitness kind of program. Thank God, because that's where he was when he had his heart attack, or he probably wouldn't have survived it. And but he wasn't doing it until he had symptoms, right? He was treating things after he was already sick. And doesn't seem to me as much of a focus yet on proactive and preventative health and wellness. These days, the Millennials and Gen Z are much more likely to prioritize mental and physical health, and they see alcohol as something that can detract from that. The rise of the fitness culture, clean eating, self-care movements has made alcohol seem less appealing. And studies show that younger people are more aware of alcohol's link to cancer, to liver disease, and mental health issues. And they're making intentional choices to reduce their risk, which is really awesome, isn't it? And I think all of us can learn from that, from the younger generation in that respect.
Hey there, it's Molly taking a quick break to talk with you about Sunnyside. You all know that Sunnyside is my app of choice and my recommendation for a tool to help you create sustainable change around your drinking. One of the things that I love about Sunnyside is their commitment to improving the user experience, and that has been a constant since I started working with them nearly 3 years ago now. Since June this year, they have added the Android version of their iOS app, so now it's available for Apple users and all Android users. It's the same Sunnyside experience across all of those devices, and it's just another example of their commitment to improving the user experience. Another example would be the fact that now you can set it up for push notifications. So you can take all of the daily texts, the reminders, and put them into a push preference so that you determine how you want to receive the support from Sunnyside. I would love for you to check it out. Go to www.sunnyside.co/Molly to get started with a 15-day free trial today. Another reason that the younger folks are drinking less is the rise of this sober curious movement. As the sober curious movement has gained traction, people are experimenting with periods of sobriety. You may have heard like people talking about intermittent sobriety. People talk about having like a prolonged period within a month where they're not drinking, and then maybe, or they'll do dry January, they'll do more sober October. And this has really given people permission, right, to step away from alcohol without the stigma of being labeled as in recovery. And that's a really important thing. I cannot tell you, even as long as I've been doing this podcast, which, we're in our 4th year now, when I started doing this work, truly, it has come so far in such a short amount of time. And yet there is still so much to do and so much more that people need to understand. The built-in narratives and the storylines that we have held on to, and some of us grew up with believing and really internalizing those stories, meant that we really did not have a path to having a healthy and mindful relationship with alcohol. It's always either been you are sober or you're somebody who drinks, and many people who drink are over drinking. Some other things that support why the Millennials and Gen Z are drinking less are mental health awareness. Mental health has become a significant topic for younger generations, and they recognize that alcohol can worsen issues like anxiety and depression. While older generations often used alcohol to numb out, younger generations are leaning into therapy, mindfulness, and other coping mechanisms that don't involve drinking. And again, this is great news. We can all learn from that.
Another reason that it's become popular is honestly financial considerations. Millennials and Gen Z are also drinking less for financial reasons. With the rising cost of living and student loan debt, spending money on alcohol, especially at bars or restaurants, can feel like a luxury that many of them just cannot justify. And this contrasts sharply with the baby boomers who enjoyed a relatively low cost of living expense and a much higher disposable income during their youth. I know for anybody that knows people in the 20s or has kids in the 20s, there's a lot of fear around the financial realities of the world today and whether or not they will, be able to buy homes and generational wealth. All of this is of real concern. So, yeah, not spending money on alcohol at restaurants makes a lot of sense, right? Now, another factor that has gone into the shaping of millennials and Gen Zs is social media. And whether we like it or not, social media changes social norms. Unlike older generations, younger people grew up in the digital age where everything can be documented and shared. And honestly, that's a good thing. The fear of being filmed while drunk or making mistakes in public has contributed to a decline in binge drinking. And it's also, it also still prevails as a reason that people choose to drink too, but it has played a role in also showcasing alternative lifestyles like alcohol-free events, the mocktail culture, wellness retreats, and all of these things support the idea of a younger generation drinking less alcohol. We cannot talk about drinking less and the new things that are happening in this generational shift without talking about the explosion of the alcohol-free beverage market. Companies are responding to the growing demand for non-alcoholic options, and they are getting very innovative with things that go way beyond, sparkling water or, seltzer water with a lime, right? Mocktails have become a major trend, and bars and restaurants are offering like curated alcohol-free options that are just as complex and enjoyable as their alcoholic counterparts. And these aren't like an Arnold Palmer or a Shirley Temple. They are crafted with herbs and fruits and flavors, and they're really designed to deliver a premium mocktail experience. In fact, here in Portland, I know there have been small craft mocktail bars opening. There are companies, as you well know, if you are listening to this podcast, I've talked about a few of my favorite non-alcoholic beers many times, and I've talked to some of the non-alcoholic companies on this show as well. There are non-alcoholic spirits and wines, and companies like Seedlip and Lyre's and Athletic Brewing are redefining the beverage space by creating these non-alcoholic versions of traditional drinks. And these products really allow people to enjoy the ritual of drinking, which we cannot ignore that there is a ritualistic thing that happens around alcohol. Alcohol has been a part of celebrations and ceremonies for thousands of years. And so that opportunity to still enjoy a beverage that feels like you are enjoying an adult beverage without those negative side effects is, I think, a great thing. And it does not mean that you're going to increase a craving for the real thing. I don't find that to be true for myself. And I think it provides, as long as you keep your mindset in the right space, it provides a great alternative. So what can we learn from this shift that the younger generations are making around alcohol as a part of Gen X/Boomer? I don't like to say that. I feel like I'm definitely Gen X in terms of mentality, but I think technically speaking, I scoot into the very last month of Boomer. Isn't that scary? What can we learn from this shift? The first thing is mindfulness over mindlessness. Those younger generations have definitely embraced the mindful approach to drinking that I talk about all the time. And they are really evaluating how alcohol fits into their lives rather than just drinking on autopilot. And that is certainly a lesson that we can all learn. When I include alcohol in my life, I do it in a way that aligns with my long-term goals. I do not choose to drink on a nightly basis. And I want to make sure that when I do drink, I am drinking something that I enjoy, that I am staying mindful, that I am sticking to low risk limits. And it's, enhancing my experience, not taking away from it. Quality over quantity, right? So that's just the days of just drinking to drink are definitely fading. And millennials and Gen Z are more likely to savor a single glass of wine or craft a thoughtful cocktail than to down multiple rounds. And I think that is something that we can, of course, all learn from. The emphasis on quality can help us drink less while still enjoying the experience. We want to break that generational cycle. So for those of us who grew up watching our parents drink as a normal part of life, it's really important to recognize that we don't have to continue that cycle. Just because my parents typically drank every night when my dad got home from work, and this was before my mom's, to be fair, that was before my mom's dependence really took hold. Obviously, after that became the case, my dad no longer drank every night. And I don't think he would have done it every night, period, if she hadn't been the one pouring, even when they were younger. But certainly for me, the earliest memories I have of them drinking are on a nightly basis when my dad got home and in a social setting. And it's important, again, to just understand how that pattern of how we believe alcohol is supposed to be incorporated is not necessarily true, right? And that belief that we had from those younger years, the way that we were taught or the way that we saw things as a child and as we were growing up, younger generations are showing us that it's okay to redefine that relationship with alcohol, and that drinking less or not at all does not mean that we are missing out. And I hope that, I definitely, that's how I drink now. I certainly didn't learn it from a younger generation. I worked on this myself, but the important part is that that's what's happening now, which is great news for our younger generations. We've come a long way from the drinking norms of our parents' generations, and younger generations are leading that change in terms of redefining what moderation and mindful drinking look like. But no matter which generation you belong to, the key takeaway is this: you have the power to shape your relationship with alcohol in a way that serves your health, happiness, and long-term well-being. You get to create your own peaceful relationship with alcohol. Use science as your guide, stick to low-risk limits, and decide ahead of time how alcohol is going to be a part of your life on a regular basis or not. If it's not going to be ongoing and you just want to drink on special occasions, or you only want to drink on the weekend, but you want to stick to low risk limits, however it's going to look for you, then make that decision and know that or not drink at all. Either way, whatever works for you, know that your decision, you have the power to make that happen. And if you're struggling with it at all, I would love to talk with you more about that. If you are ready to explore how mindful drinking, how an alcohol minimalist lifestyle can transform your life, I would really invite you to join my one-on-one coaching program for women. It is called Proof Positive. And this 12-week program is tailored to your individual needs, whether you want to drink less, feel more in control, drink not at all, or simply explore how to become someone who desires alcohol less. I would love to talk with you. You can schedule a free discovery call to see if working together is the right fit for you. And you can find a link to do that in the show notes, or you can visit www.mollywatts.com/workwithme. I would love to help you create the change that you've been looking for, and we can do it together. All right, my friends, that is all I have for you this week. I hope you've enjoyed talking about the generations, and I hope that you use this conversation to inspire you to think a little bit about what you may have learned from your own growing up experience, what you may have learned from your career days, and what you're still carrying with you in terms of your core beliefs around alcohol, those ACBs that drives your desire to either drink or not drink, and how we can help you, how we can help change those thoughts so that we feel differently, so that we are motivated to take the action of drinking less, prioritizing alcohol-free days, and creating a peaceful relationship with alcohol. I'll see you on Thursday for Think Thursday. And until then, choose peace, my friends. Thanks for listening to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. Take something you learned from this week's episode and put it into action. Changing your drinking habits and creating a peaceful relationship with alcohol is 100% possible. You can stop worrying, stop feeling guilty about overdrinking, and become someone who desires alcohol less. I work with people in 2 different ways, and you can learn about them over at my website. Go to www.mollywatts.com/workwithme or reach out to me directly. Shoot me an email, molly@mollywatts.com. We'll jump on a call and decide what might work best for you. This podcast is really just the beginning of our conversation. Let's keep it going. If there's one thing I know, it's that change is way easier when you stop trying to do it alone.